What is going on, Chess YouTube? In today's video, Gukesh D, the reigning Indian world champion, he busts out a brand new opening idea versus Ding Liren, the Chinese former world champion, at the 2024 World Championship match. And this new opening by Gukesh D is so freaking strong, Magnus Carlsen himself, the GOAT, even tipped his hat to Gukesh D and copied the idea later that year in one of his own games. All right, now, Gukesh, playing as white, opens 1 knight to f3, the ready opening, and black 1 d5, seizing control of the center. Now here, Gukesh on move 2, g3 is the move, heading for a king's Indian attack setup with moves like bishop g2 and short castles. Now here, black has a wide variety of responses he can play. For example, c5, e6, and knight to f6 are all very standard. However, Ding Liren, he plays a move that is essentially the main line these days at the highest level. That is simply g6. Now, what is the idea behind this? Black, of course, is copying white, but there is a more sinister idea behind it. If white simply castles ASAP like this and then castles, black's idea is to go e5 as the bishop supports that square. So, of course, Gukesh, he sees this, he knows this, and on move 3, he simply goes d4, clamping down on e5 once and for all, and stopping any sort of e5 nonsense from black. Now, both sides, they continue. Bishop g7, c4, and then c6. So far, very standard stuff. White playing sort of in the spirit of the Queen's Gambit opening, and black's playing in the spirit of the Slav defense to the Queen's Gambit. Now, both sides castle. Bishop g2, knight f6, castles and castles. And this position right here has been played in millions upon millions of games. White has a huge variety of ideas here. For example, moves like queen c2 or b3 or a4 are playable. Knight c3 or d2 or e5 or a3 are playable. You can go b3, you can go a4, you can go bishop to f4. Almost anything you want to do here is playable for white. But in the game, Gukesh, he plays a move that is played less than 1% of the time. He plays the move here, rook to e1. Rook to e1. Just appreciate how bizarre this move is. Is white threatening e4? He wouldn't. He couldn't, as the knight controls the e4 square. Has Gukesh lost his mind? Now, Ding Liren, he has basically free reign to do whatever he wants here. He can develop, he can go a5, bishop f5, whatever he wants. But in the game, he plays the sharpest, most principled, and strongest response. That is simply taking the free pawn on c4. D takes c4, and now how is white going to regain the pawn? Up until this point, every single game that has reached this position, white continues either a4 or knight to a3, essentially trying to regain the pawn on c4 as fast as he can, or trying to clamp down on any kind of b5 nonsense from black. However, Gukesh, in this position, he marches to the beat of a different drummer. He does not do anything about this pawn. Instead, he plays a gambit, and he plays the move e4, gaining space in the center, an absolutely ludicrous idea. And by the way, up until this point in time, this move here, e4, had never been played before in the history of the game, and it is a new idea, as white here is not trying to regain this pawn. He's gambiting it, literally giving it up for free in exchange for the beautiful pawn center, making this, by Gukesh D, a brand new opening idea, and therefore a brand new chess opening that I'm calling the Gukesh Gambit. All right, from here, Ding Liren facing off versus the Gukesh Gambit for the very first time. How does he respond? Well, he knows with white's pawn on e4 and d4, these pawns are so vulnerable, and therefore he lashes out bishop g4, putting immediate pressure on these pawns on e4 and d4. The point is, the knight on f3 is pinned to the queen on d1, making d4 that much more vulnerable. Now, Gukesh, he sees this. He finds the strongest move, knight bd2, developing that pony to d2 and supporting the other one on the f3 square like this, therefore bolstering all of his pawns. Now Ding Liren, he's got to find the right response, and it turns out here the best way for black to proceed is b5, gaining space on the queen side, clamping down on this pawn here, and getting sort of the semi-Slav style pawn chain on the queen side. And yes, white does have some compensation. He's got strong pawns on e4 and d4, but overall, black here is doing outstanding, and Ding Liren should be pretty happy overall with his position. but instead Ding Liren, he does not go b5. Instead, he goes for the other queenside pawn strike. That is the move c5, a very, very common idea in literally all 1d4, d5 style openings. However, in this position, this move is quite a bit weaker. White is not obliged, he has no obligation to take on c5. Instead, here, Gukesh D, demonstrating his sagacity, he finds the stronger idea of d5, gaining space in the center in the spirit of the modern Benini opening. Now, the point is, your pawn on d5 is a powerful asset in this game. It gives you more space. It clamps down on c6 and e6. It stops knight to c6 ideas. Overall, that pawn is a huge, huge asset. Ding Liren, the world champion at the time, he knows this. He goes e6, fighting back against White's very strong, soon to be passed pawn on d5. Now, Gukesh D, h3, putting the big question to the bishop. Where do you want to go? And it turns out there is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. You simply have to give up that piece on f3. If you don't, if you go back, you take it or go g4 and win the piece. Therefore, taking on f3 is almost entirely forced. Now, the big question for the future world champion, how do you recapture on f3? With the bishop, the knight, or the queen? Well, it turns out Gukesh, he puts his thinking cap on and he finds the right move here. Bishop takes f3. The bishop now being tremendously active on this long diagonal. It slices down the board, it supports d5, and so on. Overall, just a very, very strong piece. Now, Ding Liren, the Chinese super GM, he takes on d5. White takes back, and then knight bd7, trying to get all his pieces out into the game, including his knight, his queenside rook, and so on. Gukesh, he sees the free pawn, he takes the free pawn, knight takes c4, simple chess for the world champion, and now Ding Liren, he lights the board on fire with a very, very active and very precise move. b5, here we go, pushing back the knight on c4, but in doing so, completely opening up this long diagonal. If White ever goes d5, the rook will come under attack, and these pawns on b5 and c5 are going to be so vulnerable throughout this middle game, maybe even deep into the endgame. All right, the knight on c4, it's under attack. It must go somewhere. Where are you going to go? In the game, knight to a3 was chosen, putting immediate pressure on that pawn on b5, but the drawback of this move is the knight is at risk of being locked out of the game. From here, Ding Liren, he sees the pawn on b4 is under attack. He knows his CCTOs, checks, captures, threats, optimizations. He sees the threat, and he's got many ways to respond. a6 is fine, queen b6, queen to a5, rook b8. There are a lot of ideas, but in the game, queen to b6 was chosen, defending b5 with the queen and potentially setting up ideas like c4, and the queen could be active on this diagonal. Now here, Gukesh, bishop to f4 is the move, making full use and full strength, making full utility of these bishops right here on f4 and f3. The bishop pair slicing down the board as I try to think of words to say in this video. Now, rook f to e8. The rook slides over, and then queen d2. Gukesh D finally finishing development, getting his queen off the back rank, and those rooks on a1 and e1 connected. Gukesh D, he knows his classical chess principles. All right, Ding Liren, rook a d8. He also completes development and puts the rook on a beautiful square, eyeing d5, eyeing queen d2, and so on. Now here, you may think, all right, rook a d1 is the most obvious move in the world. It's what I would play here personally as well, but Gukesh, he shows why he is truly in a league of his own right now. He does not go rook a d1. Instead, he finds a much more creative and sinister idea. But before I show you that, real fast, this video is sponsored by me. Real fast, if you're watching endless YouTube videos, including my own or someone else's, and you're failing to make progress online in online chess, I have the solution for you. Go to drmikechess.com, literally the link right up there, also down below in the description or the pinned comment of this video. It is my free online chess community. My best students there, and I have over 470 students by now. My best students are gaining literally hundreds of ELO points. My very best student literally gained 400 ELO points. He went from 1,100 to over 1,500 in the month of August 2025. Literally this past month. I have proof. Here is the screenshot right here. just happened. Really insane stuff. If you want results like that, gaining 400 ELO in 1 month, I have the best proof in the business right now. Join my free community right there. Now back to the video. All right, here. Gukesh D, his idea. Of course, it's not rook ad1. Instead, the move here, knight to c2. Okay, makes a little bit of sense. The knight on the rim was relatively dim, so dropping back. But why would you do that over rook ad1? We are about to find out. Here, Ding Liren, knight to f8. Retreating, finding a better square for his knight. And now, the big idea behind knight c2. Again, white does not go rook ad1. Instead, the move here, and this really lights the board on fire, b4. Gukesh, the pawn being supported by the knight. That was the idea. If you take, he takes back with the knight and gets a total clamp on the queen side. Instead, in the game, Ding Liren, c4 is the move, advancing and getting a very strong protected pass pawn, protected I might add, on the c4 square. But in doing so, he opens up this diagonal, and Gukesh, he spots it immediately. Bishop to e3. The bishops once again doing their magic, slicing down all of these diagonals. Look at the strength of these two Bs right here. Queen to a6. The queen flies out of the way of the attack and does its very best to pressure the weak pawn on the a2 square, which could be very important later in this game. Hint, hint, wink, wink. All right, Gukesh, bishop d4, opening up the attacks on the rooks here. And Ding Liren, he's oh too happy to go for it. Rook takes e1, and now Gukesh. Do you take with the queen, the knight, or the rook? If you take with the rook, of course, you give up a2 in the process. So you might be thinking, okay, surely queen takes or knight takes is the right response. And if you thought that, you thought wrong. Gukesh D, in this brand new opening, the Gukesh Gambit, he plays the move rook takes a1, gambiting yet another pawn, giving up a2, and Ding Liren, he takes the challenge. He says, I accept. Queen takes a2, wins the pawn, but Gukesh, he's too fast. Rook to a1, sliding back over with the attack on the queen. Both sides under a little bit of time pressure by now. Ding Liren, the queen, it's under attack. It is literally one square. If you don't go there, you lose the queen. Therefore, queen b3 played in the game. Then rook to a3, the rook lift on the third rank. Queen b1, the queen slides down. Rook to king to g2, sorry. Rook d7, rook a5, queen b3, rook a3, queen b1, rook a5, queen b3, and in this position, if Gukesh goes back, rook to a3, that will be the third time both sides have achieved this exact same position. So, Gukesh, what's it going to be? Do you want to draw, or do you want to play for a win? Well, if you know anything about Gukesh D, the world champion, you know he is playing for a win. Rook takes b5, playing on, winning the pawn. Here we go. Ding Liren, queen d3, doing everything he can to simplify to an endgame, trying to offer the trade of queens. But Gukesh, once again, he declines. Queen to f4. Gukesh D giving up the knight on c2, sliding the queen over, and instead putting more pressure on that knight on f6. Here, black can take, but then white takes back, and that is what Ding Liren goes for. Queen takes c2, bishop takes f6, and then instead of capturing on f6, Ding Liren inserts the intermezzo move, queen to f5, blocking the defense of the bishop by the queen. Now the queens come flying off the board. Queen takes, g takes, and now we have a very strange looking endgame. We have bishop takes, king takes, then rook c5, attacking c4. This kind of endgame with weird pawns all over the place, different minor pieces. This is going to be an all-out dogfight from here. Material is even, but white will likely win one pawn in the very near future, giving Gukesh overall the better chances in this endgame. All right, knight g6, Ding Liren. He's got to find some way to bring all his pieces back into the game, including the very weak knight that was on the f8 square. Now, rook takes c4 is the move, winning the free pawn. Knight to e5, forking the knight, the rook and the bishop. Rook d4 slides over and defends. But now, Ding Liren plays the very flashy move. Knight to c6. Ding Liren getting style points for this one. This guy is a fashion diva right here. I mean, look at this. If you take the knight, you lose the rook on d4. What a clever idea. Rook to f4. The rook slides over. Knight e7, defends f5, and then here b5, pushing the pawn. Gukesh trying to do everything he can to win the pawn on a7 and push this one to b8 to victory. Now, king to f6, Ding Liren getting his king into the game in this brand new opening, the Gukesh Gambit. Now, rook d4, the rook slides over, h6, king to f1, king to e5, rook to h4, targeting the weak pawn on h6. Now, knight takes d5 is the move, rook takes h6, knight c3, targeting b5, and then simply rook c6, targeting the knight. Now, knight d4, the knight opting not to take on b5, and go ahead and post why you think that would not be the right move right here. Not a super hard one, but see if you can find it right here. Why is that not the move here, and why instead did he go knight to e4? Continuing, king to e1, the king slides over, f6, the Ben Feingold counterattack. Now h4, Gukesh pushing his past alpha 0 h-pawn on the king side here. That pawn is very, very strong and uncontested overall. All right, rook d3, the rook slides in, pressures the bishop. In response, Gukesh, he makes one of the only inaccurate moves in a very, very long time. He plays the move here, bishop to e1, sliding back to the original, not the original square, back to the first rank with the bishop. Instead of that, either taking on e4 or even better, king to e2 would have been good enough to potentially win the game. Instead, bishop d1 played in the game, and now Ding Liren showing his class, the Chinese super GM, showing why he simply dominated the entire chess scene for 10 plus years. He plays the move here, f4, pushing the pawn down. The point being, he's trying to get counterplay here. If white does nothing, black takes twice on g3, and if white takes, the king gets activated on f4, and black is fighting back, and that is what happens. We have g takes, then king takes, then bishop c2, trying to get some sort of play against the rook and the knight, but here Ding Liren, rook d5, he has everything under control. Rook c4, increasing the pressure, is the future world champion, but then f5 defends the knight once and for all with the pawn. Rook b4, getting behind that b pawn. King to f3, the king march continues. Bishop d1 hits the king. King g2, rook b3, threatening rook to g3 in certain lines potentially, and now rook to e5. Ding Liren lining up the rook with the king on the e1 square, but Gukesh, he is in time. f4, the intermediate move against the rook on the e5 square. The rook has no time. If you move the knight anywhere, you lose the rook on the e5 square. That is no bueno, mi amigo. So rook e7, the rook slides back, and then rook to e3. Gukesh D finally blocking the x-ray skewer idea of the rook on the king. What do you even call that? The x-ray attack? The x-ray attack. All right, rook to h7, attacking the weak pawn on the h4 square. Ding Liren continues to fight. h5, the pawn being supported by the bishop. Can we finish this video with me holding my breath for 20 minutes straight? I don't know, to be honest with you. I really don't know. Knight to f6, the knight drops back, attacks the pawn on the h5 square. Rook to e5, targeting the weak pawn on the f5 square. Now, we have knight takes, then rook takes, knight g3, attacks the rook, rook to f8, sliding back, rook to b7, sliding over, and targeting b5. Both sides down in extreme time pressure. Gukesh has less than 1 minute left on the clock versus the 4 minutes of Ding Liren. All right, bishop a4, defending the pawn, is the future world champion. King to f3, targeting f4, f5, the passed pawn must be pushed. King to f4, f6, knight to e4, bishop c2, knight d6, and then rook d8, targeting the weak knight on d6. Now, king to e5, bishop b3, trying to support the pawn on the future f7 square. Now, knight to f7, rook d5, hits the king. King takes f6, king d2. Gukesh D, he lost the pawn on the f6 square. Now, he marches the king over, and let's see what happens. Rook b6, bishop c4, defends the pawn. Rook d6 offers the trade of rooks, and Gukesh, he accepts. King c3, rook takes, bishop takes, then knight d6 targets the pawn on b5. King to b4, knight takes. Ding Liren giving up his knight for the pawn. Absolute insanity. Knight takes, king takes, and the problem here is Gukesh, he doesn't have any pawns. He cannot promote, and therefore he cannot win the game with just a bishop. a6 is the move. King takes, and both sides have achieved a draw, as there is not enough material for either side to win the game. Wow, what a game between Gukesh the current world champion, and Ding Liren, the former world champion, in the 2024 World Championship match, especially Gukesh D and his new opening idea of rook e1, and if black takes, e4, gambiting the pawn on the c4 square permanently instead of trying to regain that pawn as everyone else before him had done. What an impressive game. All right, Chess YouTube, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please show me some love. Smash that like button. Comment down below what you thought of the game. Also, the name, Gukesh Gambit. Is that the right name for this one? I think it is, but if you have a better idea, by all means, please let me know. Comment down below whatever you want. And real fast, by the way, guys, if you are trying to level up your chess, if you're watching all these YouTube videos and you just can't seem to make any progress, again, I have the solution for you, as all of my students are seeing firsthand, including my student who gained literally 400 ELO in 1 month. I mean, absolutely mind-blowing stuff. All you got to do, go to drmychess.com. It's my free online community, powered by school.com with a K. It's free to join. I'll onboard you. We're doing tournaments very, very soon. I have free opening courses for you. I have group coaching calls. I have a community where you can ask questions, get your games reviewed by me personally, and on and on and on. If you're trying to level up, then this is where you want to go. Again, drmychess.com. Links right there. Links down below. Description, pinned comment, all that good stuff. So I will see you inside. And as always, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond. God bless, and I will see you in the next video.